this point. I'm hoping everybody can hear us. If not, say so in the chat, which you won't be able to because you won't know because you won't hear me. Either way, welcome everybody to the second of the not very consistently scheduled research meetings that we are doing live for anyone who wants to see what goes on behind the scenes in Cypher Stack. Just be a fly on the wall as we talk about things. You guys can also ask questions in the chat if there are things that you care about. We're trying to do these every once in a while, see if people have some interest. Our last one got a decent amount of interest and people saying we should do it again. So here we are. I know a lot of people may be at work or doing other things. You can watch afterwards and let us know if it was helpful. We just really believe in like open research and we build on the shoulders of giants and we want other people to kind of be able to do the same with us. My name is Diego Salazar. I own and run Cypher Stack. I am the dumbest guy here. I am not a mathematician or a cryptographer. I just pay these guys to do those things. I have some things to add every once in a while because I am more into the cryptocurrency blockchain side of things than some of these gentlemen here. And so I can provide helpful feedback and knowledge that they might be missing because they're kind of in the numbers and the letters type stuff, except for Brandon, who's been here for a while. Let me go ahead and let everybody introduce themselves. Somebody take it away.
Well, Brandon, you're like the senior research.
I thought that I wasn't starting because everybody knows me already.
Well, just for I don't know.
Okay,
Do we really know anyone?
So everybody, welcome. I'm Brandon Goodell, also known as Saray Noether. I have been working with Monero on and off since 2012, 2014 or so. Involved in Monero Research Lab. Hosted the first Monero conference in Denver a couple of years ago. And I'm also one of the dumbest people here.
All right, we'll go in alphabetical order by last name, so that would be me next. My name is Rigo. I am Diego's younger brother. I am a mathematician that he has been trying to drag into the crypto space for many, many years. And about last year, I said, fine, I'll go do it. Fun fact, I was also at Brandon's Denver Monero conference. I flew there, got trapped for like a full day in Austin because of the weather, and missed half the conference, and it was a really bad time for me otherwise. But the talk was fun. The talks were fun when I got to see them. But yeah, I'm a junior cryptographer here, and my specialty is just printing out all of the papers and just going over it line by line and almost writing everything over and over again so I can understand it.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Freeman. I got my PhD in cryptography from Clemson with an emphasis in zero-knowledge proofs. Really just a few months ago, honestly. I've started a postdoc at the University of South Florida, working in code-based cryptography. Now, if you know anything about cryptography, you know code-based cryptography and Monero, Bitcoin, these sorts of things really don't have anything in common. And that's true. I've been working at Cypher Stack for about a year now, but I've really fallen in love with these like discrete log, elliptic curve constructions. They can be very privacy-centric. Honestly, they're more versatile than what I've been classically trained in, but I'm really looking forward to the future, like what we can do with these things and how we can make everything better for everybody.
Hi, I'm Luke. I am also a math fella. Did some research in like number theory and coding theory. Big thing that I really like researching right now is some of the like quantum algorithm stuff. It's like really neat, really mind bending, kind of weird. We got to talk about that a couple weeks ago. It was a lot of fun. So hopefully we'll be able to bring up quantum stuff at some point in time in our conversation so that I'm not alone in this rabbit hole I've found myself in.
I
You
mean,
can see Luke is calling in from the woods. It took a lot to get his connection going there, but it's working somehow. Big on him. Good job. So today if you haven't seen our previous episode before, the way we do it is we kind of just give what we've been working on. We have the researchers meet once or twice a week virtually. We meet occasionally in person, where I get everybody together so we can work on the whiteboards and eat good Mexican food. But virtually, we get together once or twice a week just to kind of go over some different stuff that we've been working on and how we're going about it. For the live streams, we try to have a specific topic after that somebody wants to present on. Last time was on Mimblewimble kind of in general. This time we're going to be looking at Litecoin's Mimblewimble extension blocks. We're not going to stay on Mimblewimble forever, guys. Don't worry. Next time will probably be something else. But the Mimblewimble extension blocks is something that I've wanted to get a firmer grasp of in terms of privacy guarantees. I was on a podcast with Vlad, who runs the Bitcoin Takeover podcast, quite some time ago with Luke Surmowski, that's here. And it was a long podcast, like 4 hours or something like that, and maybe 5. No, it was 5 hours. But in it, we were trying to, rate the different privacy technologies and specifically what sorts of guarantees they would give to the people that use them. And Mimblewimble extension blocks was one of the ones that I was the least knowledgeable about. So I have wanted to have my guys look into it sooner rather than later, and they've done so. And so Luke will be giving a bit of a presentation on that here, and we'll have some discussions on different privacy guarantees and stuff like that. But for now, I will go ahead and stop talking and hand it over to them. First, guys, feel free to discuss what we've been working on this past week and where that has gotten us and thoughts for the future.
Well, does anybody want to start in particular?
I'll just say for the past few days, I've printed out generalized bulletproofs, and yeah, I've been going over that. Yeah, Brandon, I was talking to you. I think you said you resolved some of that.
Actually, I was just finishing up the last little bit of that right before we had our meeting. So for the audience members, generalized bulletproofs is purported to be a proving system for arithmetic circuits, similar to bulletproofs, but generalized a little bit. It kind of has a storied history. The Curve Trees authors first proposed generalizing bulletproofs. And then I believe that another author, possibly a Cypher Stack author, proposed a way to cut the size in half. Diego, do you remember if Aaron was the person who proposed that, or was there like another author in between?
That I don't recall.
Okay, well, at any rate, long story short, it's pretty important for the full chain membership proofs in Monero to go forward. So we're doing our best to make sure that it's secure, and we are checking all the proofs and dotting all our I's and crossing all our T's. What's up, Freeman?
So I guess to give a little bit of background for those in the audience who don't know what bulletproofs is, the big idea is when we have a transaction, because basically all cryptocurrencies work over some sort of modular arithmetic, so things circle around like a clock. There's this worry that if I give a transaction for a small negative amount, then in communication, it actually looks like a large positive amount. So if I give you a transaction for something small, you can end up with something big, and that's inflation. That's bad. We don't want that. In any transaction, if you are losing money or you're gaining money, that's problematic. It's a bad currency. So what Bulletproofs does is it has a range proof. So in every transaction, you can make sure that the amount is between, like 0 and $1 million. So then in any transaction, there's not going to be any problems with negative numbers causing overflow. This is pretty much a requirement for any cryptocurrency because of this inflationary glitch, where you don't want it to be possible at all for anybody to leverage this. Otherwise, it's just bad currency. Generalized Bulletproofs tries to improve on this in some ways, but there's still some discussion as to what exactly it does better and if it really does it better.
And a question that I had, because this is something that I've been thinking about as we've been going over this, because I know there's bulletproofs, then there's bulletproof plus, and there's bulletproof plus plus. In the kind of scheme of those three, does general bulletproofs mostly just fall like primarily under the first?
So actually, so again, the story of bulletproofs is a little bit of a storied history, right? Bulletproofs themselves came out; they're great. Everybody loved them. I believe that Tari Labs was instrumental in determining some improvements to bulletproofs called Bulletproofs Plus. I'm not super familiar with Bulletproofs Plus. My understanding is, go ahead, Freeman.
So one of the things that bulletproofs, well, okay, I guess let me just start from the beginning. Bulletproofs has 3 different inner product relations that one needs to prove. So of course you can just do these one by one. I think the real key thing that bulletproofs does is it actually puts them together into a single one that can be checked easily. So basically you end up where you have these committed values, you do a single inner product, and then if the arithmetic works out, you know that the person, the prover, actually does have a small value. Great. Well, one of the big things that Bulletproofs Plus did is it turns this inner product, so you have some vector on the left, you have some vector on the right, it turns it into a symmetric inner product. So you actually just have a single vector and you're taking the inner product with itself. So this basically halves the communication. Instead of sending you A and B and you take their product, I just send you A and you multiply it by itself. Bulletproofs Plus Plus did some extra kind of like actually really crazy stuff, but there's still some discussion as to whether Bulletproofs Plus Plus is secure and appropriate for things like Monero.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that one of the results that Aaron, one of the previous researchers at Cypher Stack, I believe that Bulletproofs Plus Plus is, at least in the form when it was first studied, was not secure as it was described. So that jives with my understanding also. And that's where I was going with your question, Rigo, which is where did generalized bulletproofs fit? Generalized bulletproofs are a straightforward sort of extension of the bulletproofs framework, and you're not using that like self inner product that Freeman just described. So it's much closer to the original bulletproofs framework. So.
All right, let me just jump in real quick. I've also just been rereading through the paper. I'm more or less just pulling up a page and staring at it and checking for anything that doesn't sit well. And I haven't really found anything yet. I think I made a note or two about like a typo or something that I found. But besides that, nothing terrible. And then looking at some of the Mimblewimble stuff, the discussion last night made me quite sad. So I was hoping that there was something more there, but whenever dead memes started floating around, I was just a tad bit disappointed, because I think the cut through idea is kind of clever if it were practical in any which way or form. But the more I think about it, the more I realize, yeah, it's probably not. Yeah, Freeman.
Could you explain a bit more what you mean by cut through for our audience?
Oh, yeah. So the idea is that if you have like compatible transactions, so if A transacts with B for like $50 and then B transacts with C for $50, then you can kind of cut out the middleman and just record that like A transacted with C for $50. And the idea is that this should cut down on some block size, storage space, all that sort of thing. But it doesn't seem like it's super practical, at least in current form. And I'm glad we get to talk about this a little bit, because I was wishing last night when the conversation was happening that it was a conversation that we were having in person as opposed to over text. So yeah, that's
we just gotta schedule another stack attack. What's up for you?
Yeah.
So when Luke says it's not very practical, what he means is the point of this is if there's like a stem phase, so person A sends money to B, who sends money to C, who sends money to D, then the cut through works. Great. Unfortunately, a lot of the like practical transactions look more like a fluff phase. So you have a single person who's sending transactions to a bunch of other different people, and none of them are interacting mutually. So you can't really use cut throughs because you don't have a chain of transactions. It's just like a flower of transactions.
By the way, so for the audience members, Freeman instinctually used some terminology there from Dandelion, which is a network-based protocol for relaying transactions across the network in a way that sort of tends to obscure the origin of the transaction in the network, like the geographical topology of the network. And so it's based on this idea that dandelions are flowers that first they stem up and then they grow a flower and they turn into these like white puffies and poof. And I'm pretty sure that dandelions exist on almost every continent. So I don't think I need to assume that that's like an American flower. Does anybody know if there's like Southeast Asian dandelions?
There's Antarctic dandelions. I've
There
seen
are
those.
Antarctic dandelions.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you making it up?
I mean, I got to. There has to be somewhere, right? And dandelion's like the most like weed like. It's
Right.
so hard to kill off.
They're present on all continents except Antarctica, is what a quick Google AI overview says.
I don't trust it. Google AI has lied to
That
me
just
so
means we
many
haven't
times.
found them yet because Antarctica is hard to explore.
That's right.
Anyway,
The one thing that I kept kind of thinking about, the cut through does allow for like some plausible deniability in terms of like who you're like. You could always claim that if cut through is happening, if someone's like, oh, well, you transacted with this person, you could always say probably not. It just happened with a cut through. But yeah.
See, I actually think about it the opposite way. Because with a cut through, okay, you have person A sending, $10 to person B, $10 to person C, $10 to person D. To make this cut through work, you have to know who person A is and who person D is. So with that, person A and D can never plausibly deny. Sure, person like in the middle, person B sort of vanishes from the transaction, but it's
no, you just need to match keys, right? Like, but that is equivalent to knowing who the person in the middle is. But if you can tell that the inputs were sent and received from the same key, right? Same address. That's all you need.
Well, what I mean is it's not like ring signatures where any one person can sign and you have no idea which one. So you get one out of N privacy.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Mimblewimble is famously... So Mimblewimble's weird. It's sort of like these telescoping sums. If you get, if anybody from the audience remembers like a calculus class where you do like 1 minus 1/2 plus 1/2, and then minus a third plus a third, and so on and so forth to do minus 1 divided by n and then plus 1 divided by n. If you do that, all the interior terms cancel out, and then it's like really easy to compute. It's just the endpoints subtracted from each other. And that's sort of like what the transactions in Mimblewimble do. I kind of like thinking about them like they're stacked cups, like those stack cupping competitions where people like try to stack cups as quickly as possible. It's the opposite, where you're trying to like nest cups within each other. But of course, the practical matter is that very, very few transactions in real life go through that stem phase that Freeman was talking about. So Mimblewimble is a fun novelty, but I'm not sure how practical it is.
So yeah, let me jump in a bit here, because when I first heard about Mimblewimble and the way that it's kind of presented to audiences at large is when they talk about cut through and keeping the blockchain really, really small. I should know better. I know blockchain very, very well. But for some reason, it popped into my mind that a miner is able to, so like, let's say person A sends to person B, Alice sends to Bob, I guess, is the terminology that computer people use. And then that gets mined by a miner and put on the blockchain. And then the next block, let's just first assume the next block, Bob sends to, who is C person? Christy?
Charlie.
Charlene
Yeah.
also.
Bob sends to Charlie. And then that gets mined and put into the blockchain. And then Charlie sends to D person in the next block, et cetera, all the way down.
Diego.
It was, yeah, me. He sends it to me, to Diego. The way it's kind of presented to the audience when you're talking about cut through almost makes it seems like a miner can retroactively go to blocks that have already been published to the blockchain and kind of take those transactions away and republish the block without those transactions because it's not needed anymore because once again A goes to D. And I guess the reason I kind of believed it was because there's all sorts of wizardry that happens that I go, I mean, I don't understand it. I guess it happens, but on the surface, like that's kind of the whole point of proof of work is you can't do any reorganizations or whatever the case. So what I'm trying to say is that was kind of my framework of thinking in terms that like miners are going to be able to kind of retroactively go to blocks and clean things up that don't necessarily need to be there on older blocks. But that's not how it works. And I realized this in our previous live stream when Brandon was going over the math and showing things and explaining things. What has to happen is Alice needs to send to Bob. Bob needs to accept that zero confirmation transaction because it hasn't been put into a block yet. It's still in the mempool. And he, assuming his wallet software has the capability to accept and spend zero confirmation transactions, needs to then send to Charlie, who can then send to Diego, all without this being mined into a block. And once that happens, a miner is able to kind of excise Bob and Charlie, so it just looks like A sends to D. But all of that needs to be done while the transactions are still in the mempool. Everybody needs to accept a zero confirmation transaction to make that happen. And then what is ultimately published to a block is A to D. But this has, I'll let Brandon speak in just a moment. This has a couple of issues. One, we tried to make block target times fairly small. With the exception of Bitcoin being kind of 10 minutes, like Monero's at 2 minutes, and others are even less because we want to achieve a semblance of finality. So we can start building confirmations on top of these blocks fairly quickly. But that means that the odds that person A sends to person B, who sends to person C, who sends to person D, within the 1.5 minutes that you potentially have to actually make before the miners actually put it into a block, that's actually not that actually doesn't happen very often, if ever. Especially with Mimblewimbles, a lot of Mimblewimble implementations needing kind of a three-way handshake, which we're not going to get too far into, but being interactive. So what that means is like even without this whole fluff and stem thing, just as even if it was sequential, it has to be done so fast that very few transactions, if any, are actually going to be able to be cut out. And that's kind of like the first problem, that we have low target times these days. But secondly, you have to accept the zero confirmation transactions, and you have to have a non-malleable blockchain that doesn't allow for things like Bitcoin has a replace by fee, RBF, where if you try to send a transaction and the fee is too low, so it's not getting mined in a good amount of time, you can rebroadcast that same transaction with a higher fee, so that way miners will be more likely to actually put it in the block. But this has been used for nefarious purposes, in the sense that I could send money to Brandon, he sees it pop up in his wallet, because most wallet UIs these days will have it'll show it's not confirmed, it'll show it's a zero conf, but it'll say receiving, or instead of received or something like that, it'll show up in the UI of his wallet. But then I can go ahead and do an RBF, do a replace by fee, but change the address that it's sending to myself. And so the miners are more likely to mine that one because it has a higher fee. So really, it just goes back to me. And if Brandon doesn't wait for at least one confirmation, he might be fooled into letting me leave with my groceries or whatever the case may be, right? Whatever our scenario is here. That is called a malleable. Those are called malleable transactions, where they can be kind of replaced like that. For example, Monero does not have malleable transactions. There is no replace by fee sort of functionality that is accepted by the protocol. So once you send, for all intents and purposes, it is just received. There is still some concern with zero confirmation transactions, but not a huge amount. But yeah, it does force people to accept zero confirmation transactions and subsequently spend those. And the next person to accept that zero confirmation transaction, which is now 2 zero conf steep, and send that as well in order for the cut through to actually work. So this is a very long-winded way of saying, I don't think many transactions are actually cut very much, unless I have a really basic, and all of us here have a very basic misunderstanding of how all this is functioning. Because maybe, I don't know, maybe the Grins and Epics and Wimble coins of the world have actually done an implementation thing where it can, I don't know. Feel free to correct me on these things, but as far as I know, all of us here at the Cypher Stack have that understanding of how Wimble works. So the reality is most things are actually not just going to be able to be cut through, and they brag about their small blockchain sizes. Maybe it's just because nobody uses the coin.
So one of the things that occurs to me during what you just said is, if you're willing to accept zero conf transactions, which a lot of people are, there's other solutions that don't require matching or beating the speed of the block arrival rate. For example, like payment channels. If you're willing to accept zero confirmation transactions, then maybe you're willing to open up a payment channel with somebody. Because the way payment channels work is you're basically swapping coins back and forth, and then eventually you come to an agreement and you close on the chain. And this is the sort of model that's useful in a couple of different cases. Like one case would be like a subscription service or some sort of like a loan where you have to pay back a certain amount, contractually, you have to pay back a certain amount every period of time. And then, that way you don't need to actually close down back onto the chain until the loan has been, completely exhausted. The problem is that just like, Wimble's a little less fragile than payment channels, though. Payment channels are really fragile because if one person crashes or if both people's devices crash, or if you haven't backed up the state of the channel or something like that, you get they're not robust at all to noise. So,
yeah.
but in my opinion, like a payment channel sort of scheme can work a lot better than something like Wimble would. But that's just the way that, I mean, like I'm somebody who like really enjoyed the notion of the Lightning Network back when it existed, and when people were talking about it. I thought it was cool. I still think it's cool because you get all of these really relatively fast confirmation times, and you never need to hit the actual blockchain. So there's some merit to the idea, but I don't think Wimble's it.
So real quick, one idea. So whenever we were talking in our chat yesterday, I was kind of keeping in mind all of the different ways that it seemed broken, and with those things in mind, trying to come up with a way to like keep it afloat. The only thing that I ended up settling on is would it be possible to have like a long-term transactions, like whenever I go to pay for something, I have the option that I want this on the block as soon as possible, or it's okay if it sticks around a little bit, so that we kind of have this like floating pool of transactions that you could potentially match up to. That might make the cut through possible given the short short mining times. So like all of the miners just have this little library of transactions that they can pull from, and then it could work. I'm not really too sure how you'd incentivize that very well. I'm not sure what incentive someone would have for joining the longer wait time, unless it's for like shorter fees.
Maybe there is a way to. So everybody here, I think, has heard of, and we all kind of disparage when we're not on camera, the notion of like a double blockchain where one chain is work and the other is stake. And the reason that we tend to disparage that behind the scenes is because, well, we don't really like stake at Cypher Stack for a bunch of different reasons. but maybe you could have like a stake-based chain, because those are much easier to change than a hash-based, like a work-based chain. Maybe you could have a state-based chain, a stake-based chain where you have all of the initial wave of transactions, and then after 10,000 stake blocks have passed, you create an epic of a single work block, and you do as many cup collapses as possible and do a Mimblewimble telescoping, and then like settle onto a work chain. That might be doable, but again, it feels like a workaround for the fundamental problem of the fact that money tends to branch, in a fluff phase.
Well, yeah, Freeman.
I was just going to mention that it feels like this cut through is really only effective for, in like a graph theory sense, chains. And of course, cycles are still chains. But most transactions are disjointed. You just have a bunch of two graphs that don't connect at all. So then the cut through is completely useless in this case. So sort of like Diego was saying, that's why you don't really see it used in practice. It's a great idea, but practically it's just not how things work.
So this actually reminds me of, so directed acyclic graphs are also in one-to-one correspondence with like sets, partially ordered sets. You can always draw out a partially ordered set as a directed acyclic graph. And there are universal ways of like collapsing a poset to some sort of like minimal version of it, which would essentially be what you would want in a tree-based Mimblewimble. But I'm not sure exactly whether or not that's even worth going down. That'd be interesting though. The problem is that money really branches so frequently that is not, even if you had like a really great poset reduction algorithm that pushes a tree down into its like smallest possible like reduced state or something like that, those trees are going to branch so often. Yeah, I don't really see it being useful. I don't know.
So, I was muted. So all of this is kind of the case for vanilla Mimblewimble. And this follows up with kind of our math explanation for how Mimblewimble works. But Mimblewimble has, first of all, I'd like to touch on the UX issue. It has what I alluded to earlier, interactive transactions where you have to like actually scan other people's like QR codes several times back and forth, up to 3 times in order to actually finalize and send a transaction. But there is an implementation. First of all, there are several proposed research implementations on how to make it non-interactive. Most Bitcoin and Monero base derivatives are non-interactive. All you need is the address and you can send. You don't have to have the receiver do anything and then the sender do something a second time. But what Litecoin has done is Litecoin has implemented Mimblewimble with MWeb, Mimblewimble extension blocks, which is a parallel running chain type thing to Litecoin. So the Mimblewimble, the vanilla Mimblewimble itself, it does have a couple of chains, namely Grin being the most well-known, Epic Cash being another, and Mimblewimble Coin being another. And but Litecoin put out Mimblewimble extension blocks, which they are positing as a privacy layer on Litecoin. It's interesting and nice that they're not really calling it a scaling layer, although there are some people that say it helps with scaling. Although with the discussions that we're having here, I'm not particularly sure that, as we discussed, that Mimblewimble's kind of scaling stuff actually works in practice. But they are positing it as a privacy layer. So that was the thing I really wanted to get our hands deep into, was what does this mean for Mimblewimble as a privacy technology? Because obviously with cut through, if you can cut from person A to B to C to D down to person A to D, then persons B to C kind of disappear from the chain, which is something, it's some kind of privacy. Obviously a miner, because they are the one that does the cutting, they can kind of keep a full transaction graph, which is a known problem with Mimblewimble and not something we have to rehash here. But Litecoin's model is kind of similar to Zcash's shielded and unshielded thing, is in that you have regular Litecoin, which is fully transparent. You can, what they call, peg in your Litecoin to the Mimblewimble pool, and you can send from Mimblewimble to Mimblewimble, same how you can shield your Zcash and then send from shielded to shielded. And at any time, you can go shielded to unshielded, or you could peg out, in Litecoin's terms, from Mimblewimble extension blocks pool to regular Litecoin. Obviously, this has some privacy issues, but what I really wanted to know was how safe, how private are you if you stay in the Mimblewimble extension blocks pool? Let's, for the sake of argument, let's say as soon as you get Litecoin, no, let's say you receive, you never touch public Litecoin. When you first make a wallet, first thing you do is turn on Mimblewimble, make a Mimblewimble address, and you only accept the Mimblewimble stuff for goods and services, and you only ever send out to another person's Mimblewimble address. So you never interact with the public chain. How private are you compared to other technologies, such as Monero as it is currently, Monero with upcoming FCMPs, Fearo's Lelantis Spark? If you just stay in the Mimblewimble pool in Litecoin, what are the kinds of privacy levels that you can expect?
If you held a gun to my head, knowing the little that I know about Mimblewimble extension blocks, because it is hard to find information on Mimblewimble extension blocks. It's actually kind of easy to find information on them. It's hard to find a descriptor of how they work under the hood. And like, this is actually, you know, arguably probably the single best contribution anybody could make to this space would be like a YouTube channel where they go through different coins and just explain the guts of them like in like cryptographic detail. That'd be very interesting. But I know that Mimblewimble transactions, as far as I know, they still have like an input and output address. You still have an amount being written to the blockchain. The main difference is that there can be an arbitrary number of intermediate interactions that don't get described to the blockchain. So if you look at privacy in general, it's very traceable in the sense of Bitcoin. You're using public addresses. I think Mimblewimble extension blocks may be different, but Mimblewimble uses just public addresses. And so that's traceable for the ones that get hit to the blockchain. So if you're able to like make 99% of your transactions off chain, then that's 99% of your transactions that never get written to a public record. Right. So that's completely different from Zcash and Monero, which are the two go-to examples, or Fearo, is my understanding, is a pretty good alternative also. Those ones, you always have information being written to the blockchain for every single transaction. In Zcash, in the shielded pool, purportedly, it's a zero knowledge sort of animal, so you're not actually revealing anything with your transaction. With Monero, you have this limited ring size. You're actually revealing a decent amount of traceability with Monero transactions, unfortunately. It's one of the reasons that we're trying to move to full chain membership proofs. Mimblewimble instead is like, all right, well, we're going to have to sacrifice the public part of it because we're going to have to deal with that no matter what. Even in Monero and Zcash, you have public keys. But we're just going to do our best to keep as many transactions off the blockchain as possible. And from that perspective, Mimblewimble seems like it could be better practically than having to write a transaction to the blockchain every single time, but it's huge, even though it's a zero knowledge proof and it doesn't reveal anything. So I'm not sure, but we need to learn more about Mimblewimble extension blocks before we speculate too much, I guess.
Well, so there was an article that I linked to Diego yesterday or the day before, where the whole thing, it was breaking Mimblewimble privacy. I think if you just search that in Google, you'll find it. But the guy who, I can't remember the name of the author who wrote the article, but he linked to his GitHub, and he's like, yeah, if you want to like run numerical stuff, you can do it using my code and whatnot. And basically he set up like a sniffer for the extension block stuff. And he was able to uncover, I think he said like 96% transaction graph.
So here's a problem I have with this, and this is a problem that I have had with people who've like criticized Monero over the years. People will make a claim like this, and then they don't specify if this is a true positive rate or a true negative rate, or doesn't mention the sensitivity or the specificity of the test, and so on and so forth. And in order to determine if you successfully identified 96% of Monero addresses, for example, you need to go get a large sample of like ground truth values. And you can't get that unless people hand over their keys. So I would be skeptical about about somebody claiming that they figured out 96% of anything. What's up, Freeman?
Also, in like the second to last paragraph, he claims, quote, "It wasn't that long ago that devastating bugs were uncovered in both Zcash and Monero." And then he continues on, "This is to be expected." But like, that's not true, right?
Well, the article was from 5 years ago. So it is talking about just vanilla Mimblewimble, and I'm not familiar enough with the state of the space at the time to comment on that. So,
I mean, there have been bugs in Monero that have been discovered, or vulnerabilities, and in Zcash also, that have been patched. But to say that they were devastating is
I don't think it's true.
Describe it like the general scheme itself is insecure.
He's referring specifically to Monero linkability. There's like you can click.
Yep. See, this is the same sort of argument that I hated back in like 2014. Here's what would happen, and this is like 2014, 2015 ish. I think Zcash was like brand new at the time. Monero would have been around for like 2 years or 3 years or something like that. Zcash might not have even existed yet. No, it was right around the time Zcash was invented. And that's the reason that this sticks in my mind, is because all of these like trolls who were like Zcash shills would come into the various chat rooms and like start hyping all of these papers about traceability in Monero. And of course, like I just said, unless you have a ground truth to compare it to, you are just making up numbers, and you're saying, all right, I applied this test, this statistical test, and it gave me an answer 96% of the time. And it's just the same sort of weak thinking that leads people to trust LLMs. Anyway, that doesn't mean
God,
that
he said it.
But that doesn't mean that their criticisms are incorrect, and that doesn't mean that the people who traced Monero back in 2014 had bad data. That doesn't mean any of those things. You have to like just make sure that you have the right perspective on these things before you go too far into them. A lot of their techniques were very important in informing us in later design choices in Monero. So, for example, let's see here. I mean, one of the reasons that we implemented Dandelion at all is because the biggest vulnerability in both the Zcash network and the Monero network is network analysis and traffic analysis.
Well,
I got problems.
I'd like to shift a little bit here because Luke, as to my understanding, you read kind of the Mimblewimble extension blocks kind of paper, like specifically the Litecoin implementation stuff of it. Whether the code actually matches the paper, we don't quite know because we haven't really delved into the code. But according to the paper, can you give a rough description of what how they say they implement it, and if it differs from kind of vanilla Mimblewimble?
Yeah, give me a second to pull up the paper just so I can make sure I don't misspeak.
As he's doing that, Diego, do we have any questions from the general chat?
Well, Brandon mentioned LLMs, so we're going to have a whole list of people who think, oh, bad take, stupid take, LLMs are great, bad take.
The only questions we have from the chat are how to get cool shirts like we have, Monero Research Lab shirt, Cypher Stack shirt, if there are any Stack Wallet shirts.
Go to Germany for this one.
I completely forgot that we were doing this today, so the fact that I was repping the lab is just complete luck.
Yeah, because I'd like to. So you guys had mentioned in the previous live stream that Mimblewimble is basically just kind of like naked bulletproofs. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
So if somebody was to stay completely in the private pool, Brandon, you said you were keeping as much information off chain as possible, but aren't the extension blocks really just kind of like a parallel running chain? So aren't they on just a different chain, all those transactions?
I'm not sure. Like, I have read papers on Mimblewimble extension blocks before, and I have not obtained a satisfactory explanation. And that could just be that that's a criticism of my ability to find writing on the matter. Luke, you've been reading about it lately.
Yeah, so that's the big issue is finding like a nice central consolidated place, because every place I've looked describes stuff a little bit differently and not necessarily super mathematically. So like the paper that I was looking for, the first one that I kind of read through is like if you just type, the first thing I did was just type in like Litecoin Mimblewimble.
Oh, great. Perfect. So there is David Burkett is here. I sent him a message. Is the primary developer who put Mimblewimble extension blocks into Litecoin. I shot him a message, and dude,
Hi.
first of all,
Whoa!
thank you for
Wow.
joining on literally zero notice.
No problem.
As we were discussing this, I said, "Oh man, it'd be cool if I could get David on here because we have
Dude,
so many."
getting an expert on zero notice is fantastic. You're efficient, Diego.
Just just so you can have a couple brief introductions. We've crossed paths before, David. I'm Diego Salazar. I run Cypher Stack. We run Stack Wallet as well. We've implemented Litecoin with Mimblewimble extension blocks in there. These are my mathematicians and cryptographers, Brandon, Luke, Freeman, and Rigo. We have we've gone over kind of We understand Mimblewimble pretty well from a code, not a code, from a math point of view.
Mhm.
But we had some specific questions on Mimblewimble as it is implemented in Litecoin. Are there any changes? Kind of what is an extension block? What does it mean? Is it like a parallel running blockchain that you lock up money in on the Litecoin regular chain, and then it gives you an equivalent amount because you can prove that on the other chain? So we've got a few questions on there. This is live stream, by the way. We have currently 7 viewers. This is just a live stream research meeting that we do every once in a while. First, can you very quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. I mean, you mostly did, but I do all kinds of different stuff in crypto. I work in day jobs mining, but then my passion project recently has been Litecoin's MWeb. Yeah, I don't know. There's not really much to say about me. I just do some stuff. But yeah, I can answer those questions though. So extension blocks are, yeah, you kind of nailed it. You lock up some coins. The last transaction in every block is called like the extension transaction or the integrating transaction. So if you want to move your coins onto the MWeb, you would have a a special output type that would indicate that it's where the output would kind of commit to the kernel. So normal Mimblewimble kernel, the kernel of the transaction, and the kernel itself will have like some pagan info and stuff. But yeah, the output, like the standard Litecoin output, will be some special script that says I want to move these coins to this kernel, and then the miner builds the integrating transaction when it mines, which involves spending those outputs and then into a new address, which is another special script that commits to the entire MWeb block. So brand new block commits to it with the own special script. So then that basically the extension block then is for every block, for every Litecoin block, there's an additional block of data that has the Mimblewimble transactions. The hash of that entire thing is committed to in the main block. So it's just a just a way of committing to additional data. It's not all that different really than SegWit. It may sound like it at first, but really it's not. Like,
Yes,
you know, SegWit kind of just commits to its own separate, all the witness data. This is similar. In that
so
aspect.
it's almost, you can almost look at it via two ways, and I just want to know which one is kind of more accurate. Is it kind of taking traditional Litecoin blocks and similar to SegWit, you just add kind of an additional area for additional information that is specifically for MWeb type stuff? So it is still kind of part of the Litecoin blockchain. It doesn't need its own security, mining, any of that kind of stuff.
Correct. Yeah.
As opposed to kind of a concurrently running
Yeah,
chain.
it's not. Yeah, it's not like a side chain or anything like that.
Okay.
It is an extension block. It's just an additional block of data committed to by the main in the main block. And so it's just, you know,
So
whole extra set.
if I visualized it as basically a conversion from one currency type to another currency type, but on the same blockchain, would that be an incorrect way of? I mean, because essentially you have the same quantity of money on the blockchain either way, right? It's just a certain amount of it is stored in Mimblewimble type of structures, and the rest of it is stored in Litecoin type of structures. Is that correct?
I mean, that's an okay mental model. I prefer not to call it a different currency type. You're just kind of moving it into a different set or a different role set.
Right.
Yeah, because I mean, it's still 1-to-1. You could do a different 1-to-2, whatever, but it's still 1-to-1. But yeah, it's just kind of putting it into a separate section and the new, you know, set of rules for transacting.
So if I want to construct a sequence of transactions with Mimblewimble, with like MWeb coins, do they have to go in the interactive protocol that like Mimblewimble?
No, so that's the big change we have between regular Mimblewimble and Litecoin's MWeb is I designed a non-interactive way to do it. Kind of comes with.
Is that the Fuchsbauer paper? I think the author. You know.
Which one are you talking?
I believe that there was a.
Oh, okay, yeah. So, sorry, I missed it. Yes, that was. So we had already had MWeb by then. I worked with them on that paper to kind of like harden our design before we launched and to help them get something documented. So it's not an exact copy of that. We had already had ours by the time that was written, but we did make some adjustments as a result of the discussions we had during the creation of that.
So now, if I recall correctly, that method of making it non-interactive doesn't allow cut through. Is that correct?
So yeah, so it has, you can have, yeah, sort of, not in the, not in the same way, not in the pre-block cut through. Yeah, so the cut through, it depends. People use cut through to mean a couple different things, but the cut through that happens like before a transaction goes on a block, that never really happens in the wild anyways. But yeah, that's
literally like the first part of this whole thing before your invitation was literally just saying, we don't see how this actually happens, and it probably doesn't actually happen in the
wild. And like the main implementations of Mimblewimble were Grin and Beam, and they both have like 1-minute block times. There's no cut through happening.
Right. Absolutely.
So yeah. Yeah. So it just doesn't happen. So yeah, we do lose cut through, and we also have to keep what is it? So we have a slightly changed security model too, in that if someone were to reorg months, I forget what we configured it to, but like months of blockchain, and like coins you specifically have sent in the past on the MWeb were not spent in that time, you could then like send those. I think I have it documented in the LIP 004. If you Google that, it's not the cleanest spec, but I can answer any questions on it. And I intend to go back and kind of clean it up some, but it does kind of, it talks about the security limitations there. It's not practically, it's nothing, not a big deal, because it's like you have to, you know, rewind a significant amount of a number of blocks, but yeah, it's not quite the same pure mathematical like clean.
Live streaming is on. Live streaming is on.
So you know how papers are actually written, right? The first name is always like the person who does nothing for it and is, like the.
So
have it.
in math,
but-
we do papers alphabetically to avoid that problem.
Oh,
And
really?
Yeah, so like
Okay.
in other disciplines, when you get a mathematician on the field, that everybody starts to argue about who's first, and it's just a fight that I'm not used to having.
Mhm.
Okay, we are back on. My thinking is that Jitsi has an automatic 1 hour turn off live stream thing, which is easily circumvented by just turning it back on, but it toggles it off after an hour, and we've been here for about an hour, so that's that. Apologies to everyone for the brief interruption. We are back on, and I've just confirmed that on the stream. I wanted to come back with a question. David, do you have a write-up anywhere of Litecoin's specific way of implementing Mimblewimble?
So yeah, we have there's a couple different LIPs. So let's see if it's right in the GitHub for Litecoin project.
Okay. For those of you in the audience who don't know, LIP stands for Litecoin Improvement Protocol. This is kind of
Exactly.
a community thing that takes place on GitHub. There are BIPs for Bitcoin, and a lot of coins have something similar. Maybe one of the tasks that we here at Cypher Stack can do is kind of do a halfway formalization of these LIPs, so they don't just have to kind of be on GitHub for esoteric type people, but we can have kind of something of a write-up, maybe blog post level or whatever, just kind of looking at this a little bit more, so we can pass it around.
That'd be great. And as I wrote MWeb, I had a kind of a monthly post. Let me remember where that was at, and it spelled a lot of different tech decisions out, but in amongst a bunch of other just me rambling. Let me see if I can find that. So it's on litecointalk.io. Let's see. There's two different like progress update threads. They're just MWeb progress update thread. So if you look for that, you can kind of see like just read my monthly posts, whatever. I try not to be too wordy, but then I spell out kind of the decisions we made along the way and why we made them. So that may be helpful if you guys do that. But LIPs 2 and 3, the ones that kind of spell out everything but the non-interactive portion, those were written very early on, and they're poorly written. So sorry about that. And 4 is a little more formal, but you end up scratching your head a little bit trying to figure it all out. But it's all in there. It's all in, like 4 is better documented, just a little bit dense at times.
Okay. Yeah, and we can kind of after this call, just at your convenience, we can get several of these links and kind of compile them, so we can, because I think that would be very beneficial. Litecoin being one of the top coins that it is, I really think it's important that we kind of have a easily accessible. It doesn't have to be the most full-blown, thorough documentation ever, but I think even right now it's really difficult to find good documentation about how MWeb works, which is totally fine. Like your job is to code the stuff, and it's the job of people like us to kind of put out the papers.
Yeah, so it's unfortunately on Litecoin, it's been mostly up to me to write all of it because few people have been willing to go learn how it works, which sucks, which means like me, not a people person, like has to try to talk to normies, and I'm not good at that. I'm too much in the weeds when I try to do that, and people get lost in details and they just ignore the whole thing. And because I don't like to be like kind of wishy-washy about it, but I'm not good at like finding a good balance. I'm technical. I'm not a people person.
So I still have a couple of questions about MWeb if I can. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine.
Just one second, Brandon. Yeah, I'll let you get your question in just a second. Yeah, so I do think Cypher Stack is some group that would be very helpful to help get this done. Take that burden off of your shoulders, hopefully once and for all, if we could get some good kind of write-up going.
That'd be great.
And yeah, so we'll be in contact afterwards about how we can be very helpful to this process, because I have a soft spot for Mimblewimble, even though it kind of vanilla Mimblewimble kind of sucks. But
yeah, you've been in it a while.
Yeah.
I remember way back in the Green Beam days, messaging me. Yep.
Okay, Brandon, go for it.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I apologize. This is a real bad habit I have. So anytime that I do that,
I'll do the same. So.
okay, cool. I see you. Anyway, there's talk that the MWeb is sort of like a privacy layer for Litecoin. And as somebody who's been involved in Monero for a long time, when I hear that, I get suspicious. Can you summarize what the purported privacy benefits are of the MWeb?
Yeah. So if you ask the average Litecoin user, it's perfectly private. Use it for any crime, whatever, you're safe. But I would tell you that's a bad idea because it is not Monero level privacy. It's not Zcash level privacy. And even stronger yet, it's not cash level privacy, right? So there's all kinds of mistakes can be made. What it is really good at, if you keep your funds on the MWeb and don't just peg in, peg out, like it's not a mixer. People like to use it as a mixer. It's definitely not a mixer. Okay, you peg in and peg right back out later, you've gained nothing. Okay, and like maybe you luck out and there were a couple other transactions at the same time and it wasn't recorded what happened, and maybe you can obscure it enough that whatever. But you see the amounts that are being pegged in and you see the amounts that are being pegged out. If they're the same minus a couple of fees, it's easy to draw the line. Oh, this same coins here, right? So definitely not a mixer. There are things we could do to improve that. We have CoinSwap, which there isn't an implementation of it yet, but we don't yet have it like hosted or anything. But there's things we could do to improve that. But what it is really good at, if you keep your funds on the MWeb and spend them on the MWeb, it hides balances, right? So it gives Mimblewimble level privacy as long as you stay on the MWeb. It hides balances. There's will, there's no address reuse. You don't have the problem with Bitcoin where you can reuse an address or whatever. There's none of that. It's uses non-interactive transactions, but it's stealth addresses. So that's similar to Monero there. But we don't have the strong unlinkability by default. And we currently lack the usage to have even like reasonable, like plausible deniability from using it. Like it's not enough that you can really obscure the flow of funds. Maybe now if you go look at a block explorer in the past and you weren't actively monitoring, which is most people. So like if you want privacy from your ex-wife or something, like most people aren't monitoring the network at all times, right? They're not pulling the IB Bugatti, which anyone familiar with the article back in the Grin days, they're not like actively monitoring a significant number of the peers and whatever to have all the metadata to follow the transactions there. But there are probably people that are. There's probably a chain analysis or someone similar running that data, trying to grab those input-output links before they're all coin joined together in the block. So yeah, it's definitely not going to conceal the source of funds from like very sophisticated attackers, government level, that kind of thing. We hope to improve it. It's a step one, but for now it's for everyday ordinary privacy improvements over Bitcoin. We hide our funds. You don't want to buy your coffee and everyone see the balance of your wallet when you do it, right? That's just crazy.
That's really big. I've always been kind of under the assumption that Bitcoin itself, if we're being brutally honest, for first worlders anyway, I'd like to make that clarification. It probably serves about 70% of people's privacy needs, just naked Bitcoin, right? Because the average Joe just does not know what they're looking at if they were to go to a block explorer and how to follow funds, right? So if you're trying to hide from a stalker or a potential like you said ex-wife or something, then like 70% of people's needs are going to be handled via Bitcoin. There are going to be a couple people that do know a little bit more. So like, yes, if you go to third world country, buy something from a food truck over there and they look and say, oh, this guy has this much Bitcoin in their wallet,
yeah, that's scary.
They could come at you with their wrenches and you're out of luck. So something like this very incremental privacy movement from Litecoin, it doesn't like give you the big privacy guarantees, but it does take you that tiny step further in terms of having the smaller privacy guarantees that matter to day-to-day people, which honestly
Mhm.
kind of bumps that number of like Litecoin MWeb is enough for 85% of people, maybe, right?
Mhm.
Monero is going to add another 5% on top of that, and then like a super Zcash Halo 2 Orchard type setup, or Monero with the future FCMP updates would kind of cover the remainder of that up to a
Mhm.
certain small percentage of people that may need something even beyond that. But yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
And
Charlie always describes it as like I'm gonna butcher this, but like going from like a glass house to like house with windows. Like we're no longer seeing everything, but it's not perfect. You're not like dark room, whatever sort of thing. And we'd love to have Monero level privacy or Zcash level privacy, but we can't currently do it in a scalable way or without introducing ridiculous cryptography assumptions like Zcash does.
right.
I'm not smart enough. I wish I could. I wish I could follow Zcash spec and understand that it's perfectly safe and fit it into Litecoin, but I'm not.
But see, like that's kind of the thing is that because Litecoin is already pretty generally used in a lot of places as kind of a little Bitcoin secondary that is easier to obtain and has
Mm-hmm.
has smaller fees, even just this kind of incremental bump is
Mm-hmm.
puts it in a very usable place for a lot of people, I guess I'd say.
Yeah.
Any questions from any of my cryptographers, mathematicians here?
Just a quick question: are there any like current in the works proposals for like trying to handle the linkability issues, or is that just a big open question?
Uh, the Mimblewimble coin swap is our one. We have an implementation. We don't use it because it not yet because I just haven't had time to really harden it and find an appropriate set of people to run servers. Because the way it works is you have it's like a mixnet. You have 5 or 6 servers. You submit your coin like a coin swap. You submit a current coin you have and like encrypt a bunch of packets based off the other 5 servers so that and then like when the last one decrypts it, there's a new output that's included in the transaction, and a bunch of people submit those, and if they follow the protocol, build a new transaction that has all the inputs and all the outputs, kind of you lose the link there some. It helps obscure the based on the anonymity set is then however many participants there are. And none of the servers learn anything about those as long as at least one of them is honest. So we want to have a nice, respectable set of participants, some anonymous, some well-known, and geographically dispersed. So like I have to do some work to find the right candidates and that kind of thing so that it's a trusted system. But that's the big one right now. There are things we can do with like Dandelion implementations to try to make sure that there's some mixing going on there, but it all involves a lot more usage than we have right now. So currently our focus is more just been about adoption. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's, if I can speak on that a little bit, I don't know if you've had a chance to mess around with Mimblewimble extension blocks on Stack Wallet,
I
but
haven't.
we try to simplify, and you probably saw like in the MWeb developers group that I was talking about kind of Stack Wallet's approach to that, because Cake Wallet also has MWeb stuff, as I know like different reference implementations do, but a lot of the terminology is kind of like peg in and peg out, and you can choose how much you want to peg in and how much you want to peg out, and it's very granular in that sense, good for power users, but the average person just doesn't really get or understand. And so you may remember my talk on nomenclature, like, what could we say right now in Stack Wallet? We say privatize funds, and it's kind of an all or nothing thing, which I totally understand is not ideal, as you had said, because if you kind of put everything in then just take everything out, then it's it's easy to see who you are because you put in 312.46 Litecoin into the MWeb, you peg that in, and then 304 point something, whatever I just said, minus fees coming out. So if you just take it in and out, you don't really gain anything. But for the average person, just parking their money into MWeb and just kind of leaving it there, temporally, that helps to break a few links, not very robustly, but somewhat, right? And more than that, if you start spending in the MWeb economy and stay there, that's gonna,
Yeah, that's how you really get your gains. Yeah. Yeah, my big complaint there was just the word privatize. That's not what privatize means. I know we've had this discussion.
It is what it means. It's just not how it's used in the modern vernacular. But yes.
Yes. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
So I think the Stack Wallet approach of just kind of having one click and boom, your funds are private, and for some definition of private, which we don't expand upon, we don't have a big eye that you tap and then it tells you everything, but is, I think, kind of better, because then we can get more people to park their money, and the bigger the anonymity set gets in this sense, and the more people park their money there and actually contribute in the MWeb economy there, the stronger things are going to be overall, especially for this incremental step that MWeb is. But that's just my take. I don't really need feedback on it, I guess. One last round of open floor. Anybody else have any questions for David as he came to talk with us here on MWeb in particular?
I just wanted to clarify. You guys, you said that you use stealth addresses. So for audience members who aren't aware, these are like one-time keys that should only be used once. And so you might, this is more for the audience than for David. You might wonder how one-time keys that are only appear once on the blockchain can really be used to trace you. And the answer is actually more than you think, because these one-time keys can be clustered together, and a statistical learning approach can be used to like assign them to single users, and then you can develop like profiles about user behavior from these one-time keys. So this is one of the reasons that Monero doesn't just rely on one-time keys. It started out with like ring signatures also, is to sort of like spread out the liability of each transaction across multiple keys. So this is one of the ways that it seems to me that MWeb is like on the gradient of security. Is there's this slope of stepping up from like, okay, in Bitcoin you have public keys that are static one-time use. Satoshi said that you should only use them one time, but they aren't designed to be one-time keys. They can be used multiple times. And then you have one step up like towards MWeb style addresses, and then you have another step up towards Monero level of like spender ambiguity, and then you have another step up towards like the Zcash shielded pool. So that should give listeners some perspective on the landscape of how security can kind of go. What I find interesting about that is it all comes from the keys, right? It all flows from the keys outward from there. So if you think about how keys are designed, you can think about how the whole thing works. Anyway, that's my ramble.
Okay, I don't want to take up much more of David's time. Thank you for coming here. Literally zero minutes. It has been fantastic. I do have one last question for you that's a bit of an open-ended one. You had mentioned that MWeb or Mimblewimble was kind of the most, not because of cut-through, but kind of the most scalable option. And you said you wanted to improve the privacy with the MWeb stuff on Litecoin, but you haven't really found anything that's particularly scalable. And, for those of you listening, like Monero takes a pretty big hit on transaction sizes by having all this privacy tech. Same with Zcash, which they're hoping to fix with Tachyon here pretty soon, which would be pretty neat. But has anything kind of crossed your desk or anything kind of intrigued you? Like, oh, that might be a thing, or has nothing really further in terms of more robust privacy that's more scalable? I know you were talking about the coin swap being probably the best thing, because technically a lot of that happens off chain, right? Just any other things that had crossed your mind?
Well, I'm an old man now, so I don't learn quite as quickly as I used to. So it's harder for me to keep up. But luckily, there's not for me, not for everyone else, that there's not as much going on. There seems to be less research in that area these days. So there's like there's not really. It's a shame really. We used to have like from the 2016 to like 2021 era, there were so many cryptographers working on these problems, new papers all the time, and younger me could keep up somewhat better than now with the much slower trickle. But like there were just so many different avenues to explore back then. And it just kind of seems like it's matured now, and the people have lost interest, and the AI is taking all the smart people, and so there hasn't been a lot of like
Okay.
new developments around this. And you mentioned Zcash being larger. Is that true? Are their transactions larger? I was under the impression they weren't really any larger than
Than
Bitcoin ones these
they
days.
are larger, but their upcoming Tachyon research is looking to get those down to about Bitcoin level size.
Oh, okay.
Which is very interesting and very powerful considering how powerful their Halo 2 Orchard stuff is. So I'm actually really, really looking forward to that. Anyway, thank you, David. Wow. We were talking about this and had so many questions of like, let me set up a Telegram message and boom, up you popped. So super thrilled to have you here, man. There are very few of us indeed that are kind of still boots on the ground trying to improve privacy and cryptography in this particular area. That's what Cypher Stack research team is trying to do. We are very hands-on with Monero's FCMP stuff, but hopefully that'll be coming out Q1 2026. I say super hesitant.
Is that when it's?
No, this is in no way official. But
I didn't realize it was that close. I know it's been like I've been kind of following.
Goodness, do I hope. We're pretty all hands on deck here at Cypher Stack and in other places in Monero Research Lab to try to meet something like that. But I would say with a 90-something% certainty that 2026 in some point for sure, unless things go catastrophically wrong somewhere along the way. We're kind of like 3 steps from the finish line in terms of just verifying all of the math. That's not to say we haven't hit a couple of bear traps, even a couple that we're dealing with right this minute, but we're quite close. We are quite
That's exciting. I'm glad to hear it. I've been excited to see that stuff go live for a while now.
All right, man. Well, I'll be in contact soon. I want to help you guys. I want to help. We can formalize this a little bit, kind of in a more indirect way, but then also maybe potentially like a super nice heavy hitter, full blown paper kind of way. Just for everybody's sake. That's what we're here for. And we've got some, not tons of time, but we've got the talent here to make sure that gets done and take that off your shoulders.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. Yeah, and I'll send you some links that you can start with, and feel free to ask questions whenever.
All right, we'll probably be going for another 10 minutes or so, but you are free to leave or stick around as you please, David.
See you guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming, man. Man, that was really cool.
That was nuts.
Yeah, that was massive.
I was like, who's this random person? What is happening?
Well, because at the beginning we were talking about getting quote unquote stream sniped. And I was like, oh no, it happened. I should have listened to the warning on Jitsi.
So, the funny thing is, I was literally just about to say when he joined, like the second he joined, I was about to say, so guys, just so you know, I did invite David, who's the MWeb guy to see, and then he showed up and like, oh shoot, they're going to think this random guy joined up. But yeah, that was crazy. Awesome. Thank you so much, David. If you're still listening in any capacity, either in the present or retroactively, thank you for joining us, man. That was wonderful and very enlightening on a lot of levels and respects for us. So with that in mind and everything that we've learned, yes, we're still in a public forum, but what do we think, in terms of privacy? Yes, Luke.
Yeah, so just to quickly talk about the LIPs. I did read through those, and they do get like progressively better. The most recent one has all of the stuff that I was looking for in in the literature, because he said it was very dense, but it's dense in like the mathematical way that it should be. It would be nice to go back through and kind of like add in details to some of the older ones, because I think that paints a fairly complete picture. But I feel a lot better having it framed as like privacy for the everyman kind of approach, where it's, you don't necessarily need this like beat the NSA level security. You just kind of, just to make you feel a little bit better, you know, it's like a baseball bat underneath your bed, you know, might be.
I mean, I'm sympathetic to that, but dude, okay, you want to run a currency, you're going to have to run a business with currency, using that currency. And if you want to run businesses using that currency, your competitors should not be able to see your financial behavior. So like a lot of people think of Monero level privacy, Zcash level privacy as this like, I mean, let's be honest here. The stereotype is like people buying baby tigers on the dark web or whatever, right? But in practice, privacy is important to business, even if it's not important to individuals. And so, I mean, personally, I think it's important to individuals. I think it's dramatically important, and it's becoming more and more important every day, obviously. But to people who are skeptical about whether or not Monero can be used, or Zcash, or Mimblewimble, or MWeb Cash on Litecoin or whatever, you know, you got to be able to run a business without your competitors seeing what you're doing. That's like a pretty much like a minimum level bar for a genuine currency to pass. Because even if you're using US dollars and you're Best Buy, you can't go see what like Circuit City's doing with their Wells Fargo account, right? That's just not going to happen.
Well, and that's actually what I was about to say, is I feel like MWeb takes Litecoin up to actually what the majority of the world is comfortable with. It's kind of like debit card level privacy, in the sense that if you spend with naked Litecoin or Bitcoin, people can look into your address to see how much is there. Whereas if you spend with your debit card, you know, in theory, at least, you know, I hope so, but not without warrants, and but yes, there's legal stuff, right? The place where you're spending runs the card, but they themselves can't see into your bank account that the debit card links to, and know how much money you have from that point. Yes, you know, behind the scenes, people are selling everybody's, you know, what they spend on for advertisers and yada yada. So in a sense, it kind of steps slightly beyond a debit card in terms of privacy. And if pretty much everybody in the world is already on board with debit card level privacy, I mean, we all know the banks can see. We all know some of the stuff is being sold to some of the advertisers. I say we all. I mean, not everybody, I guess, but and you know, enough people. We all understand kind of the general threat model of debit cards, and the vast majority of the banked world is comfortable with this set of trade-offs. Like Bitcoin to me always seemed like a step back to that, because it's like anywhere you spend can look into your bank account and see how much you have if you're not careful with your Bitcoin, and it's easy to foot gun, right? Whereas Litecoin takes it just that slight step further to just beyond debit card level privacy, which again, most people already are comfortable with that set of trade-offs. Freeman.
Something which I've always thought is important to keep in mind is, like, yeah, you know, we're privacy dudes. We want as much privacy as possible. You know, give it to me. Everything hidden, everything blinded. But is the government okay with that? So I think in the long run, we're going to start seeing, you know, more things like Monero be delisted, and more things that have debit card level privacy, maybe not supported by the government, but at least large government collaborations like in the EU, they'll put up with it. So I think in the long run, we're going to start seeing these more like acceptable privacy level coins start to survive in places where maybe the more privacy centric coins might not.
I think it's probably reasonable to expect something like a privatized, that's a weird, let me put it another way, a shielded stock market sort of thing, where institutional investors who have the approval from whoever the powers that be are allowed to trade on this private network so that they, can conceal their activity from each other for capitalism reasons, right? But the everyday person probably is not going to be able to use a cash level. I mean, debit card level privacy is a great way to think about it. There's a fantastic paper by it's a nonprofit. It's a paper called "The Case for Electronic Cash," Coin Center, a nonprofit named Coin Center. And essentially, they make a real great argument in this paper. It's like a policy paper. It's not a math paper. It's a politics paper. They make a fantastic argument for private electronic cash, and the basic idea is that if you want to go donate money to a local church, you can go slip cash under the door. Nobody will ever know it was you, right? And we want some form of electronic payment system that is similar, because that's sort of how a free society has to work. Right. Even if you don't believe in the business aspect, and even if you don't believe that people should be able to buy baby tigers on the dark web, obviously I don't believe that, but there are reasons to go for privacy anyway, especially if you think about like senior citizens who don't necessarily know how the internet works, don't necessarily know how scams work, and they get scammed out of their money constantly, right? So having some sort of like debit level protection for those people protects them against their fellow citizens and predatory businesses. Again, like Freeman said, we don't necessarily need to protect against the NSA or like a state level actor in order to improve people's daily practical experience.
Okay, I have a question then for you guys. Luke, as you recall, in our podcast with Vlad, we kind of had a checklist of numbers for best case scenario privacy, where like, what about sender privacy, receiver privacy? What about foot gunability? Like, how easy is it to foot gun yourself into breaking your own privacy? And it was like 7 particular things, and I actually don't remember all of them.
If you give me 1 second, I think I still have where I wrote it down somewhere on my tablet. Let me see if I can't find it.
Take a look. For the rest of you, Vlad basically had us go systematically. Monero as it is now, Monero with FCMPs, Zcash Halo 2 Orchard. I don't recall if you had us do Zcash Sapling. I don't think so. Firo Spark Lelantis with FCMPs, and Litecoin MWeb, which is one of the ones that we were the most unsure of. And it's a similar question to that continuum, that spectrum that I talked with you guys, where 1 being the least private and 10 being the most private of the given options, not 1 being not private at all, right? But just being the least private of the options. 1 was always Monero as it is now, right? And 10 was kind of Zcash Orchard level privacy. And the consensus, well, not the consensus, but as I've spoken with you all and things, Monero with FCMPs gets to about a 9-10. Currently, Firo Spark Lelantis is like at a 4 or 5, and with FCMPs jumps that up to maybe a 7, right? And I'm just looking at privacy coins. Obviously, if Bitcoin was on that continuum, it would be like a 0, right? But with what we know now about MWeb, even if best case scenario, you stay in the MWeb pool and it's only MWeb to MWeb, they just have stealth addresses. They don't have ring CT, ring signatures.
Yeah, they're 1 step below Monero.
They're 1 step below Monero. So best case, MWeb to MWeb, and you never touch the public pool of Litecoin is actually our new 1, with Monero being a 2, Bitcoin being a 0, -1, depending. Yeah, okay. Because we didn't know, we had assumed that MWeb to MWeb, because it was all pooled and stuff, because they it's all in the MWeb pool is how they describe it. But really now I get a better picture of what it actually is. That it is, we had put it fairly high, higher than Monero, potentially on par with like Lelantis Spark in some areas, but I see that is now not the case. Okay. Did you find it, Luke?
No, I didn't, but I do remember writing down a lot of question marks for the Mimblewimble stuff.
Okay, yeah.
So I don't think we gave like definitive scores for most of the categories.
I would even argue that like Mimblewimble might be the new zero, and Bitcoin is -1, or maybe not Mimblewimble, MWeb. And the reason that I would argue that is, well, actually, no. You know what? Yeah. They got rid of cut through, right? So this is something that David mentioned a few minutes ago, is that they kind of had to sacrifice cut through in order to attain what they have. And one of the big reasons that I was even willing to consider it as a privacy solution in the first place earlier in the discussion, not like I'm some arbiter of what counts as privacy or whatever, but one of the reasons that I'm skeptical about that is that if you don't have cut through, then that big argument I had about every transaction having to be written now holds. So I would argue that just because you have stealth addresses doesn't mean you have other forms. I guess you have stealth addresses and hidden amounts, which is nice, but you still don't have. You still have every transaction being written to the blockchain. So I would put it at a 0.
What is the tech that the hidden amounts has? Monero uses CT. Well, obviously ring CT because modified for ring signatures.
Mimblewimble itself, every coin is a Peterson commitment to an amount.
Right. Okay.
The way that you spend it is you prove that you can open it. And so
with stealth addresses, you have receiver privacy. Like I always try to show Monero kind of as sender privacy, receiver privacy, and amount privacy, right? So I mean, obviously Monero has a little bit more than that, but for sender privacy, you have ring signatures.
Right.
For amount privacy, you have ring CT. For receiver privacy, you have stealth addresses. So Litecoin has 2 of those 3. It has stealth addresses and it has amount privacy.
That is a great way to look at it.
Ring signatures, which is the weakest part of the Monero thing, but also gives us the most problems. Because if you don't have sender privacy, a lot of things are blown wide open. So even though MWeb has 2 of those 3, because that's the weakest thing in Monero is one, and it gives us so many problems. This actually, I wouldn't say blows MWeb wide open, but definitely allows a passive surveiller with significant resources, or maybe even potentially non-significant resources, to find things out faster and or follow links a lot better. As an example, Bitcoin's Cake implemented one of Bitcoin's technologies, which is basically just stealth addresses for Bitcoin. It's called silent payment. It's called silent payments, and we're actually looking to get that into Stack Wallet too. But it's pretty much just stealth addresses for Bitcoin, is what it is. And it comes with all the drawbacks where you have to actually scan the chain if you use, so that way you can actually find the things that are yours instead of just asking Electrum how many coins you have and it tells you. You have to scan the whole thing. So Bitcoin stealth addresses is kind of Bitcoin naked is 0, or sorry, -1, maybe -2. Being stupid with the scale here. Bitcoin with silent payments is kind of a 0 because it's just stealth addresses.
Yeah.
It doesn't have any sort of amount erasure, and it doesn't have any sort of ring signatures for sender privacy. MWeb is one step beyond that because it not only has stealth addresses, it has amount blinding. Monero, as it is now, is the step beyond that because we do have sender, receiver, and amount privacy, including Dandelion++, which is another. It just reduces metadata leakage and all those things. Okay, no, this is very good. This whole shebang has answered a lot of my questions, and now probably makes me the definitive person to know everything about all the privacy things from a layperson's level today. Which is pretty fun.
Absolutely. Now you can explain it to somebody in an elevator.
They're like, get me out of this elevator.
I mean, you got to have a captive audience, otherwise they're going to escape anyway.
That's right. I'll punch the buttons until the elevator stops working, and then it's like, now you're stuck here with me. All right, guys, we've been going for about an hour and a half, so I think we can call it here pretty soon. This was really, really good. I was worried this would be somewhat of a flop because we still couldn't get a lot of information about how certain things work. But that was solved with some wonderful personnel additions. I hope all of you listening, either as we are streaming this right now or potentially watching this retroactively, have found this enlightening. Luke, now that we do have a lot of these numbers, keep looking for that thing. Let's put out a blog post or something, just kind of the state of the privacy as it is right now. I think that'd be pretty rock solid. Thanks, guys. Any other parting comments from you guys?
Good.
Good.
I
All
hope
right.
you all have a good day.
We'll go ahead and stop it here. I'm going to press end stream. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you guys had a great time.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, stream is ended on the YouTube side. Let me click